All right, welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. I am your host, Bob Lung here, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. On the other side of the glass, where he's going solo with me tonight. We're just a duet. Ron could not make it tonight. I had to go out of town for work for a couple of days, so we couldn't do our Tuesday night show. So we're doing it on Thursday night. Ron's at work, so I got David Gautieri here on the other side. So David, good to have you. How's everything going up in the northeastern part of the United States?
It's going excellent up here. You make me feel like a live performer calling us a duet. I feel like I'm in a boy band here or something.
Yeah, well, I can't sing, so if you can, we're in trouble. Or
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
you're
gonna
singing
be
solo.
yeah, we'll be two guitar players, I guess. Then we'll
Yeah,
be
I
an
can't do that either. I
instrumental
have no
band.
musical talent. I think I've done. I was a wedding DJ for like 35 years. I finally kind of quote retired a couple years ago. That's my only musical talent. I can recognize good music. I know what people like to dance to, and I can introduce people. That's why I became a wedding DJ on the side forever.
I would have never guessed that about you, Bob. I'm so glad to have found that out.
Yeah, it was a blast. I used to love doing it. But it just got to a point where, today's music you know, just couldn't get into it, just couldn't, and you have to be careful at weddings because most of the songs today have a lot of
Yeah, right.
curse words in it. So then you got to find the edited versions, and that's not always easy. And so, it was fun for 35 years. I mean, like you said, I
Yeah, it
just
sounds like you had a good run.
yeah. Started with records in 1985 and went through all the gambit of, cassettes and CDs and digital and laptops
Now,
and
how often were you doing this? Like every weekend, once a month, something like that?
I would say at my peak, I think our peak one year, and a buddy of mine did it together most of the time. We did 50 events in one year.
Oh,
That was
wow.
our
That's a lot.
Yeah. Now, granted, we had our own sets of equipment, so oftentimes we could go out and do two weddings on the same night. So not every weekend, but that was pretty close. Um,
What is
it,
one person starting their wedding at 8 in the morning?
no, it was just
We
like
do the morning wedding and the night wedding.
no, 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 no. I meant we each had our own set of
Oh,
speakers.
you go to separate weddings.
Yeah, so he would do a wedding, I would do a wedding.
I'm like, I don't
Um,
know if I would go to that wedding if it was started at 8 in the morning.
No, I don't think I could. I couldn't do that. Not a morning person. There's no way I could do that. I'd rather start a wedding at midnight before I do one at 8
Yeah.
a.m. I am not a morning person, but yeah, it was a blast. I've seen some shit, seen some interesting stuff, seen some wild things and some stuff. You just go, what is going on here? Alcohol can do some amazing stuff for people. But anyway, so there,
That's a topic for another day.
yeah, it's a topic for another day. We'll have a complete episode on about the consistency or lack thereof in wedding receptions. Uh, but we're heading towards week 11. As always, your waiver wire ads based on consistency is up. So before we get started on the review of last week, why don't you talk about some of your favorite ads, maybe just a couple of them that you really thought would be some good pickups this week, based on some consistency over the last few weeks, that might be able out there and that you highlighted in your article.
Well, it's got to be my man, the one and only Kalen Balaj,
Right, I forgot about him. Yes, you
who
did talk about him last week.
yeah, and I can't believe we're here talking about him again, but here we are, and it was a little bit terrifying, I'll be honest, touting Kalen Balaj last week because I
Especially
knew.
when he was like not even off the practice squad yet at one point, right?
Oh yeah, early in the week. That was anything that I posted was, didn't he just get sent back down to the practice squad? So it was a rough going for a few days there,
Well,
but he pulled through. He pulled through and he
yeah,
looked good doing it. And if you look at the consistency scores, he's a little bit down there because he played 3 games with the
sure.
Jets.
Right,
But
right.
he almost had a consistent game with the Jets too. He had a game with 5 receptions for 44 yards with the Jets. So
Yeah,
he almost hit the consistency score there, and he's been 2 for 2 in LA. And
right. Yeah.
he's just been getting fed the ball. I saw a stat the other day that he's got 40 touches in his past 2 games. Clyde
Nice.
Edwards-Helaire has 26 in his past 3. So you talk about just the level of volume he's getting.
Right.
We've seen this backfield produce over and over and over again. Eckler has 18 and 31 fantasy points in his 2 full games with Justin Herbert. Joshua Kelly has another 4 games with double-digit fantasy points. Justin Jackson had 3 straight before he got hurt. Even Tremaine Pope has a 67 rushing yard, 5 reception game this season with Justin Herbert. And after Kalen Ballage did it this past week, every single running back on this team has a 5 reception game playing with Justin Herbert. So they're just churning out points. And now he gets another revenge game against the Jets. So it's great news if you picked up Kalen Ballage last week. If he's still out there, he's got to be the top claim this week.
Yeah, I'm sure if you didn't get him yet, it's too late. But
that's not necessarily true. A lot of people overlooked him last week.
Okay.
Like he hung around. He's still available. He in more than 50% of leagues. I believe it was like 25.8% of leagues he's owned. So he's out there in a good amount of leagues still.
Nice. You got another one you want to mention?
Yeah, it would be Wayne Gallman, who is surprisingly is also just out there in more than 50% of leagues. And he's got double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight games, a touchdown and a reception in all 4 of those games. He's RB11 in points per game over the last month, so he's low-end RB1 production. He goes into a bye this week, but when he comes out, he's got Cincinnati, Seattle, Arizona, and Cleveland. He finishes with a tough matchup against Baltimore week 16, but he's one of those guys who you can kind of ride him through, the home stretch and figure out something.
Maybe get you in the playoffs, right?
Exactly.
Right. All right, good stuff. Again, for you folks out there listening, don't forget, check out the waiver wire consistency ads that David has out on Big Guy Fantasy Sports. You don't have to be a member. It's free to you to read, and it's got some great stuff in it. The man picked Kalen Ballage, guys, last week. This man knows his stuff, so make sure you get out there and read that. All right, let's look at the quarterback. Kyler Murray remains the only perfectly consistent. Russell Wilson took a hit this past week, so he dropped down and tied at 89% with Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Justin Herbert, who you just discussed, at 88%. And if you don't have one of those 5 guys, you're in bad shape, which I know because I don't have a lot of. I have some Mahomes. I have maybe one Murray, no Rodgers, one Wilson. It's been a tough year at the quarterback.
There might be 6 or 7. You could say Watson and Allen too, or close. Yeah, not quite as consistent.
Yeah,
consistency wise.
Yeah, not great, but at least helping you out in total points when they are scoring. And in defense of Watson, in Cleveland, I live in that area. I was watching that game, and they had postponed the beginning of it because of lightning, thunderstorms, 40-mile-an-hour winds, and hail. And trust me, I was sitting there. I have a picture on my phone that I took when I sent it to somebody who said, "Bob, why is there no Browns game?" And I took a picture out of my back porch of the hail hitting the cement.
You're about one step short of a literal tornado.
Yeah. So that was why, and even in game, there was, they weren't kicking field goals, so they're going for it on 4th downs deep in the red zone. It was not a good environment for high scoring, so that's why Watson took a hit this week. Not going to happen every week, obviously, those bad weather games, but definitely pay attention to the weather this time of year, especially if it's high winds, some kind of precipitation, whether it's snow, rain, sleet, hail, whatever.
Yeah, it's tough because that was a good matchup on paper too against a Cleveland secondary that's allowed a lot of quarterback fantasy points this year.
All right, so David, why don't you kind of give us your thoughts on some of these guys at the quarterback position? You said before off the air, just before we came on, you had a couple that you kind of wanted to talk about. So, my friend, talk about.
And that's a great intro because we're already talking about them. And we talked about this last week. We talked about Justin Herbert and Deshaun Watson, and we talked about their schedules, right? Because we're getting to that time of year where it's schedule watching time of year, and you got to start looking to those weeks 14, 15, 16, even 13, matchups if you're teetering on the edge. And I think last week we were basically in consensus that Justin Herbert has the better second half schedule. But the more I was looking at it, I was kind of looking, well, Deshaun Watson does have one game that stands apart in that schedule, and it's the Week 16 matchup against Cincinnati. And we were concerned, right? Because he does face Indianapolis, Chicago,
Twice.
Indianapolis, 13, 14, 15,
Right.
Indy, Chicago, Indy. And
Hmm.
that means he is going to be a worse option during those weeks. And the point here that I'm trying to make is that it matters what your team construction is, right? Because if you have a team that can carry you through 14, 15, 16, you want to hold Deshaun Watson for that
Mm.
week 16 league winning matchup. Like,
Right.
if you're vice versa and you don't have a strong roster and you need this quarterback to carry you through weeks 13, 14, 15, then it is Justin Herbert because he faces Atlanta when Deshaun Watson's facing Chicago. So you
Right.
need to always, whenever guys like us are talking about, oh, would you trade this for that? You need to always be thinking about how it applies to your team, what your team situation is like, and what are the
Hmm.
nuances of it. Because I'm in a league where I have Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. He's
Nice.
technically my quarterback too. And I also have Kamara and Waller. So I'm not trading Watson for Justin Herbert. I'm going to hold out and try and get to that week 16 matchup. Or
Right.
on the other hand, if I had a weaker roster, I would probably be willing to entertain making that move.
Gotcha. No, that's a good point. And like you said, this is the time of year when you start looking ahead. Like I'm in some leagues. Kings Classic League is a perfect example. I'm 4-6. I lost this past week. And I'm sitting there going, well, am I done? And I look and I go, oh no, I'm only 2 games out of third place.
Wow.
That's how tight it is. I mean, granted, there's 7 teams ahead of me that are somewhere between 6-4, 5-5, and 4-6. But the point is, there's a chance. It's kind of the old what's the line from Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. So that's the thing. Look, pay attention. You unless you're way out of it, that's one thing. But the other thing too, and I'll just say this as a public service announcement, please keep trying. Don't just not set your lineup and be a jerk, especially if you're in a league. Um, no, it doesn't matter. Any
Do it
league
for
that you're in.
yourself. Do it
Yeah,
for your bragging rights. Who wants You don't want your friends to know you as that guy who sets an empty lineup and
right.
is players on a bye. You don't want to be that guy, do
Right.
you?
No, exactly. So put the best lineup you can get out there. If you need to make some waiver wire moves so you don't start a guy on a bye, do it. You're not going to get a great player, but the key is that you want to show that you care enough that, hey, if you were that guy on the other side, do you want to win because somebody tanks and make it to the playoffs and some other guy doesn't because he had to play somebody who did care? So please care. Put in your lineups. I got some teams out here that are not going to make the playoffs, but I'm still making moves. I'm still picking up players. I'm still putting in the best lineup I can put in. It may not, I'm not going out there and trading anybody. I've certainly anything nuts because nobody's going to trade with unless I got like a superstar, but it's not going to help me. So but at least put in a startable lineup for the sake of everybody involved. So, anybody else, especially down, we've got some guys coming in replacement. What are your thoughts about Jameis Winston replacing Drew Brees for the next couple weeks? What are your thoughts there? Do you see consistency or do you see more of a game manager? They'll be really focusing on Kamara, short, quick passes to Sanders, Thomas, Jared Cook, that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, it's hard not to be excited. He was also included in the wire
Right.
article this
Good
week.
point. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And Atlanta has allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks all year. They keep
Hmm.
like playing Frogger with Seattle, where they're going back and forth over each other for like most points. And Seattle's about to, they're playing as we speak, so
Right.
Seattle might hop right back ahead
Hmm.
in total points allowed. But Atlanta has just been a cake matchup. And I wanted to go back and kind of look at last year to see what Winston did against Atlanta. He
Hmm.
put up 313 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in the first game. The second game they played, only 13 to 24, 201, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. So
Hmm.
one pretty good game, one so-so game. I think, if anything, it makes you more excited for Michael Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Winston, obviously, I think is a good stream this week himself. But
Sure.
also, I think Atlanta defense, he threw 4 interceptions in 2 games against them
Right.
last year. I mean, even if it could be one of those games where he ends up putting up 300 yards, but he turns the ball over 3 times as well. So there's going to be fantasy points on both ends. I think you're targeting basically everyone possible in this Atlanta-New Orleans matchup.
Absolutely. In fact, you brought up a good point because I was setting my lineups today, and I was needing some defenses to replace some defense I had on buys, or just replacing them because they sucked. But I did pick up Atlanta in a number of the leagues because, obviously, normally you're not going to start them because they just haven't been very good. But as you mentioned, they're playing against Winston, so at least one pick six is a potentially a given, and then two more picks, maybe some sacks, some fumbles, lots of potential for some defensive points. So I like that call there for getting
Yeah.
Atlanta's
And,
D
and it
against
is just
Winston.
occurring to, sorry to cut you off. It is just
No,
occurring to me as well. Sorry, I wasn't on top of this. I'm just like, oh, well, week 17 when they played and he only threw for 201 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks last year. I don't think he had either Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. So
hmm
he still put up 201, 2 touchdowns, I believe, probably to Brashad Perriman. Was that another Brashad Perriman week at the end of
hmm
last season? So, yeah, you're going to definitely fire up Jameis Winston this week.
right, but definitely look at your scoring too. If you're in a Scott Fish Bowl, you do not want to you do
That
not
might
want
be
to place
different.
Winston. That is not going to help you. But if you're in a traditional league where you're only getting maybe -1 or -2 for your interceptions,
How much is it in the Scott Fish Bowl?
I think it's either 4 or 5.
Whew.
Yeah, yeah. I got it on my. You remember me talking about my Tom
Yeah.
Brady -11, when he threw 3 or 4 picks. Yeah, that can kill you
Yeah.
if you're in Scott Fish Bowl. So be careful with that scenario. But anything else in the traditional scoring, yeah, Winston's definitely a very good start this week. All right, let's move on to the running back positions. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook are just dominating this year. Kamara, he's played 9 games, 246 points, perfectly consistent, 100%. 35 points behind him, though he's played one less game. Dalvin Cook, second in total points, 211. And that's all very good. But when you look at who's third and how far behind they are, and that is Derrick Henry at 162.3. He is 50 points behind Cook and 85 points behind Kamara. That is amazing that what kind of year these two are having. And again, Kamara and Henry and those guys will have their buys at some point. And then Cook will probably may even take over the lead for total points as well. But those two are definitely having a year. David, outside of those guys, kind of maybe pick out a few that you like, you see having potential to continue the success they've had or the non-success that they've had moving forward. Somebody that may be worth trading off or doing something with or trading for because they might be coming back soon, or they're just not putting up the numbers, the consistency as of recent, that may be on there.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of shocking to me that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still at 8 for 9 in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
consistency. Because I don't know if we talked about this last week, but his touches have just gone way, way, way down since Bell has come in here. He had 26 carries the last game before Bell came in. Then the last 3 games, he's got 8 carries, 6 carries, and 5 carries
Mm-hmm.
in the past 3 games. Like we already said before, 26 touches in 3 games. So he's
Well, I think
still,
he's doing receptions and touchdowns. Is
yeah,
obviously
he
what's
he's
getting him.
got three
And he's
receptions in each of
right.
the past 2 games and receiving touchdown last week. But it's concerning. Like I think you definitely got to be willing to entertain or at least try and initiate offers for this guy. On the other hand, guy like DeAndre Swift,
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got a good chance to continue. I know he's got in concussion protocol
Yeah,
right now,
yeah,
but
yeah. I haven't.
Carolina, if he can play this week, Carolina, Houston next week. If you're needing running back production now, I would be trying to make like a CEH for DeAndre Swift swap.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea. Definitely. Some other guys that are still kind of waiting to come back. I mean, Chubb came back, looked really good last week, unless you needed that actual touchdown at the end of the game. Good move for him, bad move if you needed him. Now, as I said to somebody, hey, give the guy some love. He scored 14 and a half points for you. You could have done a lot worse, especially in that bad weather that they had. He ran pretty well, I thought. So he looked good, and that team certainly is a run first. And between him and Hunt, they've been doing very well. Will continue their consistency. I mean, David Johnson's out, Joe Mixon's still out, Chris Carson's still out. James Conner's a guy that I think just a few weeks ago was right up near the top in the 70-80%, dropping off substantially. What do you think about Conner? I actually got hit up by a friend of mine who wanted to know if he should trade Conner away, and I forget who it was, and it was kind of a no-brainer because I can't remember now who it was. Might have been, I don't know, maybe DeAndre Swift. I can't remember, but it was like, yes, do it. And it might have been before the concussion, but Conner was looking good there for a while. He's still 15th in total points, but this past week, he only had 6.8, kind of like you were talking about with CEH. I think his touches are dropping off. I think they're just throwing the ball more. What are you seeing out of Conner so far?
Yeah, the worst part was it was against Dallas and Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas and Cincinnati, and you know what the parallel, I can't help but make it, and this is completely off topic, but just saying the words Dallas, Cincinnati, I'm thinking about my pitch for Logan Thomas over the next 2 weeks, and it had a lot to do with those two words, Dallas and Cincinnati. So, it shows that nobody is matchup certain, just like nobody is matchup proof. Players can have bad games and good matchups, and James Conner unfortunately has been a victim of that because, like you said, they've just been passing the ball so much, and they've been successful passing the ball. So why not? They're undefeated. You do what works, and right now what's working is passing the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely has been doing that, and that's a good thing. If as we move into the segue for the wide receivers, for a guy named Juju Smith-Schuster, who's now 21st in total points, 78% consistent. They've had a couple of games where he's not been as productive as we want him to be every week. When we've had games where Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and some of those guys kicked in, but he's still having a very solid year. I have him on a lot of teams because everybody kind of gave up on him. Gave up in the sense that they weren't drafting him as a wide receiver one and sometimes even two. But I got him in a number of leagues, so he's certainly been helping me out there. One of the few pluses for me. Probably the biggest surprise of the week was Cole Beasley with 27.9 fantasy points, led the entire NFL. Even led DeAndre Hopkins, who had the miracle catch in the end zone, who ended up second overall. But near the top of the list, actually at the top of the list, and was third in overall points this week. Stephon Diggs, second in total points, 90% consistent. We have no 100s anymore.
You know what I see, Bob? Can I
What?
cut in right there? Because
Sure.
I was literally looking at these two teams, and it's funny that you just keep talking about the Bills and the Steelers wideouts, because I think these are the only two teams with three wideouts with the 50% consistency score or higher. I mean, correct me
Absolutely
if I'm
true.
wrong, but I see John Brown at 4 for 8, Beasley
Mm-hmm.
obviously 7 for 10, and Diggs at the top of the list. Juju 7 for 9.
Mm-hmm.
Claypool 6 for 9. Then Deontay Johnson is down, I
At
believe, I see
50%. Yeah.
4 for 8. So
Right.
it's
No, you're
unbelievable.
right.
It
So
goes to show that teams can support three wide receivers, and don't be afraid to target a team's projected third wide receiver in your fantasy drafts towards the end of drafts, because there's still some upside there.
yeah, I mean, it's no question this is it's a pass happy league. It has been for a number of years now. I mean, there's other ones on here too. Green Bay with Alan Lazard at 67%. Obviously, Devontae Adams. I thought, no, maybe he's not. Maybe I thought one of the other ones was up there. No, Scantling's not up there. Okay, but anyway, I think
Panthers are close. Curtis Samuel's 44%, 4 for 9. DJ Moore
right.
50%. Robbie Anderson, 7 for 10.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, some teams that have, put up some very good numbers in the passing game, been very productive, um, this year. So as we look through the rest of the wide receivers, any others in there that kind of, you've, you know, maybe kind of touting has been looking consistent, or you just, kind of feel like, this guy's kind of coming out here and being more productive than I think the guy that surprises me, and I'll be honest with you, I drafted him a lot, and I'll tell you why. It's T. Higgins. Every league that I was in, I think I drafted AJ Green. And I know you're not a huge fan. And I know I'm going to hear a sigh, so I'll just stop you now. But what I did do, yeah, what I did do is every one of those leagues, 3 rounds later, 4 rounds later, I drafted T. Higgins. That was the smart move. The other one was
Thank
not.
goodness. Thank
Yeah.
goodness.
So now Higgins is the starter in most of those leagues, and AJ Green is not. But uh, I think one of the things I was kind of reading and what I was kind of getting to was some of the number of these rookies who are showing consistency in their first season, which is not always a thing. And you've got T. Higgins, C.D. Lamb. Trying to think some of the other ones on here that I thought there was another one. Shoot.
Oh, there's more.
I sure there is, and I can't.
Should we
Oh,
lead
Chase
this into my
Claypool.
segment? Yep, keep going,
Yeah,
keep going. There's a couple
Claypool.
more.
Ayuk.
Oh, you said it because that's what I see, Bob. That's what I'm looking at to just to cut in here because you said his
Yeah,
name. I
no.
got to. You're looking at these guys: Claypool, Woods, Higgins, Cup. I'm going down the list.
Hmm.
Higgins, Cup, Lamb,
Justin Jefferson's at 40%,
Godwin.
but he's 20th in total points. I mean, he
Yeah.
certainly's had his weeks, and if he had a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, he probably would be more consistent. But,
Yeah.
um, what do you see? What are you thinking is what's the word I'm looking for? What is changing in the game that is allowing rookie receivers, which is usually one of the more difficult positions to, one, even become a starter on the offense, and two, be consistent at what they're doing, because usually they're the third receiver and they don't get as many looks, targets, because they're not, they're not, is it stronger route running in college? Are they running more pro offenses? I mean, what do you see as this maybe scenario of why they're kind of heading in the right direction?
Bob, my guess is as good as yours, and I agree with everything you just said. I think it is. I mean, you look at just the money that's being poured into these college programs. It's
Right.
just every year it's becoming more and more. These guys just have all sorts of trainers, all sorts of it doesn't take a genius to tell you, they're coming into the NFL readier than they've ever been. And the college offenses are just becoming more diverse, more creative, so I
Mm-hmm.
think they're being taught more. This is from the outside looking in. I've
Right.
never been in a college program, but I would assume they're being taught more. They're running these offenses, so it's great. Ayuk is above Mike Evans right now in
Yeah, well, DJ
consistency
Chark
score.
and even
I love it.
Tyler
Five for
Lockett.
eight.
Yeah.
5 for 8. It's and
I mean,
nobody's talking about Ayuk with these other names: Higgins, Cup, Godwin. These are the names directly above him. Woods, Claypool. Ayuk is still, it seems like, flying under the radar to me, and he's right up in there with those other guys production wise.
right. No question. And, one of the things that I put out every year is the rookies versus consistency article, which shows how rookies usually aren't very consistent their first year and how very few even earn over 60%. We've got 4 or 5 that are already over for the year, may end up that way, may not. But a lot of these guys are showing that, wide receivers may be a better chance to take as your, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3, or getting them later, knowing that they might come into the right situation, like a T. Higgins, Claypool. Even Ayuk came into San Francisco where there really wasn't a good number 2 wide receiver on the other side of Deebo Samuel. Samuel gets hurt, and now Ayuk actually has to become the number 1, so he's definitely seeing more targets. So, again, opportunity and talent makes for fantasy success. So
I want to
definitely
pump the
look at that.
brakes here a little bit, though, Bob.
Okay.
I want to say, though, it does matter draft class, right? Because this was a
Oh, right,
historic,
sure.
it was a
Oh, right.
historically good draft class that was loaded with wide receiver talent. So if you were going to bet on a rookie wide receiver class to produce, this was a heck of a one to bet on. We've seen it before. The AJ Green and Julio Jones class, when they did it, was Sammy Watkins in that class. I might be mixing up two classes, but we've done it before where we got ahead of ourselves a little bit and we said, oh, these guys are coming into the pros readier than ever. And then there was maybe a down year, and the wide receivers didn't produce as much. So there's probably going to be another valley coming. I don't know if it's going to be next year. From all the looks of it, looks like next year is going to be another loaded wide receiver class, but it does. That's obviously a major factor in the equation as well.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the tight end position. And for goodness sakes, we finally got Mark Andrews at the top of the list. It's only taken him 11 weeks to be the number one guy, and he tied with Gronkowski, which is even more surprising.
Want to hear stat, Bob?
Yeah.
That score, the highest scoring tight end of the week, it was topped by 7 different kickers this past week. 7 kickers scored more than the highest scoring tight end.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is not a high scoring tight end but then the clutch game factor is only like 8.7. So Yikes. Only 11 guys even made it. That's the amazing part. So that's what shows you is that tight ends are they're back to where they were the last, not last year, because last year there was a lot of good consistency in tight ends. Not this year. Now, granted, injuries, Kittle, some of these guys, I get it. But, just the offenses in general just has not been. I mean, you look at the overall numbers, Kelsey, number one, 80, number one in total points, 8 of 9, 89%. Between him and second place is 50 points. Hawkinson is also at 89%, which is probably one of the best here. And after that, we go down all the way down to 67%. We have four there, one at 63, one at 60, and then everybody else after that is below 60%. I mean, that's terrible. I mean, and so I'm sure everybody out there with a tight end not named Kelsey, Hawkinson, Waller, Jonnu Smith, or Kittle, and those guys are hurt, or at least Kittle has been, are really struggling. It's been a rough year for a lot of people. Hunter Henry's not having a terrible year, but not having a great year. He's 11th in total points. Ingram hasn't. He's at 60%. Just hasn't been, what I thought he would be. I really thought they would use him a little bit more. They haven't, and I just, don't understand. He was so consistent last year. But let's obviously go straight to your man crush, and that is Logan Thomas. Tell us about Logan Thomas. 6th this past week in total points for the week. Definitely up and coming tight end. You love this kid, I know. Tell us a little bit more and why, if somebody doesn't have them, why they should go out and try to maybe make a trade. Maybe he's on the waiver wire. You never know. Could be a 10-team league. Some people may have just not been paying attention. But why we need to go out and get Logan Thomas.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll get to Logan Thomas,
okay.
But I gotta use this as a pitch. You know what I do. I have to make my pitch for the top tight ends, because the fact that we are going straight to Logan Thomas as the number one topic for tight ends this week, justifiably so.
Right.
It shows you how important it is getting the Travis Kelce's of the world. And I'm going to double down on George Kittle next year as well. I'm going to go after him again. And a lot of people are not going to like that move next year when George Kittle is coming off another major injury. And who knows if he plays another snap this year. But It goes to show you the elite tight end production is damn near impossible to find. We just expect these guys to make a leap into that territory every year, and it never happens. And Travis Kelce, and for the most part, George Kittle are standing alone. They're standing alone, and then everybody else is left at sea without a paddle, so to speak, just trying to hang on and find something. And just find something to keep them afloat. It's the Logan Thomases of the world. And he matters to you. He matters to you. You can't say he doesn't if you don't have Travis Kelce on your team. Or TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller. Maybe Jonnu Smith. Hayden Hurst, I guess. I'd still be maybe willing to take a chance on Thomas over Hurst. So it does matter getting that top tight end. And I'm going to take the chance on George Kittle next year as well, in the leagues, obviously, where I miss out on Travis Kelce. because it
Yeah,
doesn't
I think
matter.
the guy I'll be focusing on next year will be Darren Waller because I'm hoping he'll be our fifth round guy. I mean, I know Kelsey is the man, but I just struggle picking him that early. I mean, I know it shows he's worth it, but it's still tough.
I do agree. Waller's probably going to be the better value, but the problem for
Right.
me is if you miss on Waller, like if you miss on Kittle, you can still get Waller. But if you go in thinking you want Waller and you miss on Waller, I guess
Hmm.
Mark Andrews will be there too next year. But
He will
I,
be
I'd,
because
I'd
people are
rather
going to be
miss
so
in that
down on him. Right.
because the one league I wanted Waller and I was targeting him, I missed. And then I
Mm.
was left picking between Evan Ingram, who's come around a little bit, but it's been a headache all season long in the leagues where I missed on those top tight ends.
Just to expound on your concept, which I love, and then now my brain's starting to click. I'm sitting there going, man, if I have like, early round pick, so 1 through 4, when I come to that 2, 3 turn, it may not be all that crazy, especially if you get a McCaffrey or one of these top guys, Kamara, whoever, to go like
Say it, Bob.
either Kelsey Kittle or uh, Kelsey Kittle or Waller.
I love it. You said it. Darren
Get
Waller, third
just
round pick.
just
I was saying
yeah,
this
just
last year. I
just
backed
double
off.
up a tight end. You probably have a flex spot open. You've just destroyed the rest of the league because now they're all gone. You know, because at some point, because if you do that, you're going to watch a tight end run at that point because people go, shit, I got to, I got to get somebody now. I got to get a Jonnu Smith or,
I will
but
say though, Bob,
it may not be crazy.
a lot of us were doing that this year,
Hmm.
except the problem was we were doing it with Mark Andrews and not Darren
Right. Yeah.
Waller.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's if you got to be a little bit more secure about that. I think Waller's production is secure though, and I do think he
Yeah.
would be worth. I mean, they're not going to be bringing in a stud wide receiver. I seriously doubt that after
Right.
investing
Well,
in
even if they do, you
Henry.
still have to have, Waller's still so dangerous in the middle of the field. If a guy's stretching the field, I mean, if Ruggs ever gets his act together and they get the speed that they have, on a consistent basis with Ruggs and Renfro and who's the other kid, Brian Edwards and those guys stretching the field. I mean, Waller would be so wide open against a linebacker in the middle underneath. Oh my gosh, scary.
And
Uh,
it's about the headache factor. Sometimes you got to put the wins and losses aside. I tell
yeah,
you what, I'm enjoying the ride in the leagues where I have the Wallers and the Kelseys
sure.
a lot more than even the leagues I have the Hunter Henrys and Hayden Hursts. You know, those
Yeah,
guys are keeping me up at night, and
right.
that there's something to be counted for that too.
That's for sure. Well, and then this year, some of the things that also is kind of really throwing me off is as much as it's the, not seeing guys like Ingram and these guys get points, it's seeing these, weird scenarios like, Pharaoh Brown from Houston earning a clutch game. Richard Rodgers, who is playing with Dallas Goedert in the lineup, outscored Dallas Goedert. Tyler Higbee all of a sudden just became relevant for a week. Believe it or not, I picked him up on 3 waiver wires. Tyler Higbee. People have just totally trashed him.
I wouldn't even have picked him up if he got dropped.
Well, here's the thing. The guy that would have had to start if I did was Harrison Bryant. So you make the call.
Yeesh,
Yeah,
yeesh.
because I
Travis
picked up Harrison
Kelsey.
Bryant when Hooper got hurt, and I used him for a couple of weeks and got a few points out of him, nothing much, because I had like Jack Doyle at the beginning of the year because I thought that was a cool idea. So yeah, it's just been a hot mess in that league, and so yeah, this week I'm like Tyler Higbee sitting there, okay, sure. But anyway, any other tight ends you want to talk about on here that you know? Um,
We'll get to Logan Thomas. I don't think I actually said anything
oh
about it.
yeah, right, yeah, we
I
never.
think I kind
Yeah,
of put
okay.
him down to prop up Travis Kelsey a little bit,
Hmm.
like I like to do with my boy Kelsey.
Right.
Um, but Logan Thomas, they played 88 offensive snaps for Washington this past week. 88 snaps. Logan Thomas was in on 87 of them. So
Wow.
he's he's on the field 100% of the time. This has been the case all year. This is not just one game. He's been on the field about 100% of snaps every single game. He played 57 of those 87 snaps in the slot, only 19 in line out of 87 snaps. So he's not even being used really as a tight end. He's being
Nice.
used as a big slot wide receiver for the most part. And Alex Smith, the touchdowns have not been there the past 2 weeks, but 325 yards, 390 passing yards. And then again, as I mentioned before, Cincinnati and Dallas. I mean, it didn't work out for James Conner. Hopefully it works out for Logan Thomas.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Um, so one thing I did notice is that, Dalton Schultz is back. Any thoughts on him? Is he a good? I saw him on the waiver wire. You know, um, I guess he not only is he back, he never went away. Why did I thought he got hurt? Oh, that's right. That's right. It was the Jarwin that got hurt.
Yeah,
Schultz is still in
we
play.
buried that whole Dallas offense as soon
Right.
as the Andy Dalton hopes and dreams went up in flames, so to speak. But you're right. Dalton Schultz seems to be the one kind of constant in this offense
Mm-hmm.
who didn't really seem to get too affected by the quarterback changes over the last 4 games.
Right.
Dalton, Garrett Gilbert, and Danucci. He's had 4 for 35, 2 for 22, 6 for 53, 4 for 48.
So it's the
again,
last
these are
2 weeks.
not
Right.
sexy, but
Right.
he's been getting it done.
Right.
About
Last
10
2
points.
weeks, again, remember 8.75 earns you a clutch game. So last 2 weeks, he's earned 2 in a row. I picked him up.
His teeth the last one.
I get it.
It counts.
But again,
Points are points.
Points are points, and when you're desperate, you just start grabbing for this stuff. Dallas is looking at Minnesota this week. They had a bye last week. Washington, at Baltimore, at Cincinnati, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. Again, if you're desperate like me and you need a tight end, this may not be a bad pickup if he's sitting out there. So take a look.
I want to hit on that too, Bob, while you're talking about schedules, because we're talking about looking ahead. This is with tight ends. If you don't have one of those top guys that we mentioned before, it's time to start thinking about not just looking at one tight end schedule, but looking at multiple tight end schedules and pairing them and trying to see if you can find 2 pairs that schedules kind of fit in and mesh perfectly together, where one guy's got a bad matchup, the other guy's got a good matchup, and you can kind of predictably go back and forth. So Dalton Schultz, if you're looking for a week 14 piece, you got at Cincinnati for Dalton Schultz. So that's a great matchup. If you've got another tight end out there who's got, say, weeks 15 and 16 matchups that you're looking to plug in, but not so much in week 14.
Right. And the key is, too, and it's something for folks to remember, especially if you're kind of new to the world and the game, and that is make sure you go online. NFL Fantasy, NFL.com, fantasy.nfl.com has fantasy points against by position. So don't just look at an overall defense and say, oh, well, Cincinnati's got a bad defense, because they may be fine they may be good against the tight end, and they're giving up all their points to wide receivers or running backs. So make sure you look. So here's some of the worst teams against tight ends: Kansas City, Seattle, Detroit, Dallas, Arizona, Tennessee, Cincinnati, which is in there. So that is definitely a good one. Denver, New Orleans, Cleveland, Indianapolis. That's probably your top 10. 10 worst. So, so if you got somebody maybe coming up against Kansas City, Seattle, those kind of teams, make sure you look at that as well when you're taking a look at, the scenarios of their games coming up. Don't just look at the defense and go, oh, well, they're terrible against the pass. Well, that may be more wide receivers than tight ends. Sometimes they have, really good linebackers that could cover tight ends and bad cornerbacks. So, definitely keep an eye on that as well. So, all right. Anything else, David, you want to talk about before we wrap it up for the night?
No, I think you made a lot of good points. I think I'll just add to it, because you were really summarizing something that's important, is looking at that points against by position. And even I don't know if it's just NFL.com. I just Googled.
I'm sure there's
I've Googled points against running back, so I've got another site too that I bookmarked. And it's important because not just that, it can dispel some of these kind of notions like we have about like the Pittsburgh defense, how great they are. Like last week, if you look at the points against, they've been giving up points. It made you a little bit more comfortable starting a guy like T. Higgins. And if you put him in knowing that they've allowed points, it ended up paying off. So it helps knowing which teams are actually allowing the points and which teams are just kind of getting by on that name power.
Right. And I think there's some sites, and it may be pay sites like a PFF, Pro Football Focus, some of those, they'll actually have fantasy points against versus or for the like slot receivers versus,
Oh,
X,
okay.
Y,
Yeah.
those, so those are out there too. Because sometimes a slot guy, they may have a terrible slot corner, and then the slot guy for that week may be a good choice, but not the other, wide receiver. So again, I don't know that I want to say maybe like Fantasy Alarm does it. I know Colby used to write articles every week about how well, certain players did and certain defensive players were, in holding, the wide receiver one or the wide receiver two or three. So definitely look for that stuff out there. And if it's a pay site, it may be worth it, especially if you got could win some money in your league. So anyway, so David, thanks again for being here. As always, want you to tell everybody about your article and where they can find you on Twitter.
Yeah, if you guys obviously we have the article every week at Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and then if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can check it out at Guru Fantasy World. WRLD is the username.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks again, Dave, for being here. I'm Bob Lung, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Follow me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. So everybody have a great week. We will be back next Tuesday, right before the Thanksgiving holidays, to get you all updated as you head into that weekend. So for David, I'm Bob Lung. Everybody have a great week. Take care. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.